American Museum of Natural History, New York. The American Museum of Natural History, abbreviated as AMNH, is a private 501(c)(3) natural history museum on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in New York City, in Theodore Roosevelt Park, across the street from Central Park. The museum complex comprises 26 interconnected buildings housing 45 permanent exhibition halls, in addition to a planetarium and a library. The museum collections contain over 34 million specimens of plants, animals, fungi, fossils, minerals, rocks, meteorites, human remains, and human cultural artifacts, as well as specialized collections for frozen tissue and genomic and astrophysical data, of which only a small fraction can be displayed at any given time. The museum occupies more than 2x106 GF, 190,000 square meters. ANA has a full-time scientific staff of 225, sponsors over 120 special field expeditions each year, and averages about 5 million visits annually. The ANN is a private 501 organization. Its mission statement is to discover, interpret, and disseminate, through scientific research and education, knowledge about human cultures, the natural world, and the universe. The naturalist Dr. Albert S. Bickmore devised the idea for the American Museum of Natural History in 1861. At the time, he was studying in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at Louis Agassiz' Museum of Comparative Zoology. Observing that many European natural history museums were in populous cities, Bickmore wrote in a biography, "Now New York is our city of greatest wealth, and therefore probably the best location for the future Museum of Natural History for our whole land." For several years, Bickmore lobbied for the establishment of a natural history museum in New York. Upon the end of the American Civil War, Bickmore asked numerous prominent New Yorkers, such as William E. Dodge Jr., to sponsor his museum. Although Dodge himself could not fund the museum at the time, he introduced the naturalist to Theodore Roosevelt Sr., the father of future U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt. Calls for a natural history museum increased after Barnum's American Museum burned down in 1868. 18 prominent New Yorkers wrote a letter to the Central Park Commission that December, requesting the creation of a natural history museum in Central Park. Central Park Commissioner Andrew Haswell Green indicated his support for the project in January 1869. A board of trustees was created for the museum. The next month, Bickmore and Joseph Hodges Choate drafted a charter for the museum, which the board of trustees approved without any changes. It was in this charter that the American Museum of Natural History name was first used. Bickmore said he wanted the museum's name to reflect his expectation that our museum will ultimately become the leading institution of its kind in our country, similar to the British Museum. Before the museum was established, Bickmore needed to secure approval from Boss Tweed, leader of the powerful and corrupt Tammany Hall political organization. The legislation to establish the American Museum of Natural History had to be signed by John Thompson Hoffman, the governor of New York, who was associated with Tweed. Hoffman signed the legislation, creating the museum on April 6, 1869, with John David Wolfe as its first president. Subsequently, the chairman of the AMNA's executive committee asked Green if the museum could use the top 2 stories of Central Park's arsenal, and Green approved the request in January 1870. Insect specimens were placed on the lower level of the arsenal, while stones, fossils, mammals, birds, fish, and reptiles were placed on the upper level. The museum opened within the arsenal on May 22, 1871. The AMN became popular in the following years. The arsenal location had 856,773 visitors in the first 9 months of 1876 alone, more than the British Museum had recorded for all of 1874. Meanwhile, the AMN's directors had identified Manhattan Square, bounded by 8th Avenue/Central Park West, 81st Street, 9th Avenue/Columbus Avenue, and 77th Street, as a site for a permanent structure. Several prominent New Yorkers had raised $500,000 to fund the construction of the new building. The city's park commissioners then reserved Manhattan Square as the site of the permanent museum, and another $200,000 was raised for the building fund. Numerous dignitaries and officials, including U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant, attended the museum's groundbreaking ceremony on June 3, 1874. The museum opened on December 22, 1877, with a ceremony attended by U.S. President Rutherford B. Hayes. The original Victorian Gothic building was designed by Calvert Vaux and J. Ray Mould, both already closely identified with the architecture of Central Park. Vaux and Mould's original plan was intended to complement the Metropolitan Museum of Art on the opposite side of Central Park. The original building, as constructed, was at the center of the 77th Street frontage and consisted of a gallery measuring 112 feet, 34 meters long and 200 feet, 61 meters tall. This gallery contained a raised basement, 3 stories of exhibits, Venetian Gothic arches, and an attic with dormers and a slate roof. The original structure still exists, but is hidden from view by the many buildings in the complex that today occupy most of Manhattan Square. The museum remains accessible through its 77th Street foyer, which has since been renamed the Grand Gallery. Carl Akeley, an American-born naturalist and taxidermist who is known to be the father of taxidermy, had numerous expeditions to Africa. During his first expedition to Africa in 1896, he was able to collect hundreds of vulnerable animal specimens of various species and origins for preservation and museum collection building back in the United States. He would primarily use firearms to shoot and kill the animals, and would only take back the most pristine animals, leaving the undesirables behind. Another notable expedition in 1905 led to the collection of 2 bull elephants and 17 tons of animal specimens in total. He stated that the expeditions were to educate the general public on Africa's vanishing wildlife, but in the end, during an expedition to field collect gorillas, took steps away from field collecting to work to build a mountain gorilla conservatory. Frank Chapman, an American ornithologist, did a significant amount of the collecting for the bird halls of the museum, as well as very influential scientific research on the problems of zonal evolution, to which he is greatly recognized for. His most notable expedition was to Colombia in 1911, specifically with artist Luis Agassiz Fortes, plus the assistance of biologists W.B. Richardson and Leo E. Miller. They collected a very significant amount of bird specimens for scientific as well as collection purposes, and took photographs of the natural setting they were present in. It was during this expedition that the faunal zones research came into fruition due to the research's close ties to the Andes mountain range. During their time in South America, they collected approximately 15,775 birds and 1,600 mammals for current and future research, plus the collection of the American Museum of Natural History. What do you think of our video? Let me know in the comment section below. Before you go, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.